right, Fergus Connolly, thank you for jumping on. I haven't spoken to you for a while, or obviously I haven't seen you for a while in person, but I wanted to get you on this podcast because, I've been talking to people about education and how they sort of forge their way through their careers, and some of the stuff was purposeful and some of it was accidental, which I could say for all of us probably. And so I wanted to talk to you about, how did you get started? And from there, we're going to obviously talk about what you're doing now, but I want to really get your insights on, if you were to be in front of a group of young people, what is the best advice you could give them about their education and their professional development? But let's start kind of at the beginning for you, when you got started in working in a sporting environment, and what lit a fire under you. What could you say was some of the first stuff that really got you motivated?
Wow. That's a it's a great way to start this conversation. Like for me, I just loved sport. I loved playing sport. I was fascinated by what it took to win and to be great. Uh, and you have a passion for that. And then you also have I guess a work ethic, like you're interested, you want to spend time. And I've often thought about it, like, what is necessary to become good at what you do. Um, but I think passion alone is not sufficient. Like there's lots of people who are really interested in doing certain things and are passionate about it. Uh, I think some of the qualities maybe that I picked up from other people were things like being, a critical thinker, trying, experimenting, trying out a lot of things. Um, but I think critical thinking is probably one of the skills that is not taught often enough, and one of the most, well, critical skills, but it's one of the most important skills I think that we forget now in education. And I think that looking back, looking at the education system today as well, I think there are three things that I think are missing, maybe not intentionally, but one is the social interaction. If you look at now, and I exclude COVID for a minute, but when we go to universities or third level education, there's so much focus on learning content. There's less opportunity for mixing with lots of different people from all kinds of demographics. And particularly when you think about coaching, the people you're going to coach are not coming from your same background or your experience. And so some of the great coaches that we've all been around have a wonderful ability to talk to all kinds of people from any background. And so I think that's one thing. I think critical thinking is another thing that's not encouraged enough in education. I think, pulling things apart, learning to identify what is good knowledge, what isn't. And then failure as well, because I think that in the education system, it's so much of it's about rote learning. And so you know how to get an A or you know how to get a B. It's straightforward. But actually failing and learning from that, I don't mean, just going out and making lots of mistakes, but as a coach, you do something, it doesn't work, so you tweak it and you keep getting better. And that iterative learning process, and actually putting people in situations where they're going to fail and teaching them how to learn from that uh, outcome. So perhaps it's not failure, but teaching people how to learn from outcomes. I think those are the three things: that social interaction, critical thinking, and learning how to learn, learning how to teach yourself. Those are three things that I think are really missing today in the education system.
Yeah, because you don't really have that opportunity. Like you said, you go, you learn something, you take a test, you write a paper, but it's not as iterative as we would like it to be. And most of the people that I've talked to have learned more from maybe doing a side gig when they were going to school, maybe working in a training room or working in a gym, and then that's where they learned. But they didn't really learn from going to school. So how do we rectify that?
So I have a theory, I have a perspective that may or may not be that popular, but I believe that when you're working with people, the process should be an apprenticeship rather than a university course. That's my own personal belief. So, and I also consider certain professions vocations as opposed to professions. So, for example, coaching to me is a vocation. In other words, you can't count the number of hours or you can't limit it to minutes. It's beyond. You're dealing with a person, a human, a complex, adaptive organism. And it's like nursing. It's like, being a minister or whatever. Those are vocations as opposed to professions. An architect or a mechanic does have a need for personal skills, but they're largely working with inanimate objects. They're two completely different things. And so to teach people um, in a concurrently how to coach and how to deal with the human, I think that has to be done through an apprenticeship type model.
And how long do you think that should be? Because if we go back to, like, say, the apprenticeship where somebody learned how to make a samurai sword or something like that,
Mm.
the stuff I read about is just like that's years and years, and until they get to that level where the master has said, "Okay, you're good enough. It's been 10 years you've been working for me." Do you think it has to be similar?
I think it's kind of like a graduated scale. So I think early on you spend a lot of time, in the company of a great coach, learning from them, picking up, making mistakes, and then you slowly get the opportunity to coach one or two people, and it becomes more and more until you eventually reach that level of mastery. But I think that the benefit of that kind of approach is that you recognize the importance of mentors and the value of them. And it's not, I'm going to use the term use, but I don't mean it in perhaps the hardest sense, but how to use a mentor, like, when to have them, when to reach out, like, what questions to ask from them. And that's a skill in itself, knowing how to build a relationship with somebody who, or people, multiple coaches or mentors that you can learn from, knowing which person is the best person to lean on or to reach out to for a particular issue. And I think that in coaching, we do tend to have mentors, and uh, but perhaps we, you get that after your degree, or after you've reached a certain level of. I think you should have them from a very early age, because they also help you identify, which we were talking about before, identify what's important. And it's not that things aren't important. It's what to emphasize more. What, everything's important, but it's how, what you really want to spend time learning. And so, yeah, I've thought a lot about this over the years, and looking at different jobs, different professions that I consider vocations, and I think coaching is one of those.
Yeah, and I think it's very complicated nowadays. Like, I was talking to a friend about hiring people. How do you hire good people? And what's the process? What do you look at? There's certifications, there's where they went to school, that's where they might have worked before. But then how do you really nail it down to get a sense of, like, will this be a good person to hire? um and now, as we've spoken about, social media has blown everything out of proportion, and maybe that's valued way too much in terms of somebody's influence and the number of followers. So how do you sift through all that garbage and go, okay, yes, this is mentorship valued? Is, did they work with this person, or are people just kind of shooting in the dark right now?
Yeah, I've said this so many times over the last particularly 2 weeks. I would hate to be starting out as a coach now. Like, where, who do you like? I mean, uh, what am I, 43 now? When I was starting on that journey, uh, there was lots of information, but it wasn't like it is now. And I'm not one of these people that says social media is bad. Okay, social media is there and it's incredibly helpful, but I do think it's more challenging now to find, um, or to identify, to sift through it. One of the other things, I don't know if this is just a recent phenomenon, but, like, I mean, I think we first met in Utah. Was it? Or where did we first meet?
Yeah, I think
Charlie.
so. In person,
Yeah,
that was like
yeah,
2006 maybe, or yeah.
yeah. So, getting up off your backside and going somewhere was, I think, a lot more common than now. And I was explaining to somebody recently about that. Like, I mean, so, Charlie, you know, people, I always tell the story about going to Charlie with 23 questions, and on the plane going home, realizing he hadn't answered any of the questions. But as I was looking at the questions I was going to ask him were wrong. But I had read everything, watched everything. But it was only when I got to spend time with someone I realized, like, even my interpretation of that information was wrong. And I can't stress to people how important it is to actually spend time with the practitioner. You can read all you want, uh, and we also we create formulas and systems and structures ourselves, but that comes from, so if you're a good coach and ask you to outline your philosophy, it's very difficult to put that into words. Now you do, but you know that you miss things. You leave them out because you want to simplify it and you want to create a system. And so somebody reads that and they think they have all, but it's only when you sit down with the person you understand the nuances and why they put it like that. And you know, I try and kick myself every now and again and go, you need to go and reach out to this person. You just can't get lazy and just digest information. You have to go and learn from people. And I think that's not as common now, maybe, as before.
Yeah, and then there doesn't seem to be that patience in people and young people that, this could take a while. Like I know when I first started working with Charlie, it probably took, I hate to say it, but it probably took me about 5 years before I could start asking good questions. And then it took another 5 years to really absorb all of that information. And then, by the time I really had a good idea of what to ask him and what information to get from him, it was probably too late. So that idea of like, hey, it's going to take a while and you have to be patient and you have to stick to it. How do you advise people around that? Because everybody wants instant gratification these days.
Yeah, and you know, uh, I'm probably as one of the most guilty people when it comes to patience. Like, I mean, I wanted to learn. I didn't have patience, even struggle with it now. I want to learn. I want to. So I'm not the best person to look for advice when it comes to having patience. But I think one of the things that I've become more aware of myself is, particularly when it came to sports science and data, was understanding the value of insight. So you can have times or you can have numbers, and that gives you like an objective metric, but that's the platform for insight when you pick up then the other intangibles. And that takes time, it takes a lot of time. And you also made it was almost a throwaway phrase, but it's really important. Knowing what questions to ask is more important than the answers, and that takes time. Yeah, that takes a lot of time, like you said, knowing what to ask, trying to, and also knowing that you might not get the answers all the time, but you're moving in the right direction. And sometimes it takes time for though you have to see the same thing with a number of different athletes or a number of different teams or whatever it is, and then slowly the answer becomes apparent. But yeah, patience um, is not a virtue that I was particularly blessed with. But you get humbled in this industry, so you're gonna learn the hard way.
Do you think technology has helped us or has it hindered some of this learning and this patience and could you provide some examples where you think it could help and others where it
Yeah,
could hurt us?
yeah. So when I was starting out, like, I mean, I think one of the first things we had was heart rate monitors. I think we all had those, and then GPS. And so I was fortunate maybe at the start of that wave. But it very quickly became apparent to me that this isn't providing answers. It's allowing a platform for insight. So somebody's running faster, somebody's got high speed running, and the other thing too you've got you know whether it's in social media or whatever, somebody saying, "Oh, this metric tells you exactly, like, relates to this." We both know that's not the case, But so you think that high speed running or whatever it is the key to hamstring injury. So that's it. And you try and make that object fit into that circle or whatever. And then you start to think you're wrong because it doesn't, or whatever that metric is. And so it takes time for you to ask questions. And you also have to be, I think you have to be like a little bit, I don't know if it's confident or uh, secure in yourself to go, no, that doesn't make sense. Everybody else is saying it does, but it doesn't make sense. And I'm going to have to figure that out. So has technology helped? I think technology has allowed us ask better questions. There's no doubt, but it hasn't provided answers in, a binary or in an absolute way that some people would think. And that's, I think, a really important distinction. So for example, heart rate variability, any of the tools that you use for heart rate variability for me have taught me what it is. I've gone off and tried to understand more about it, and that has allowed me have a greater insight into what's happening in the organism, in the human. That's what it does for me, but it doesn't provide an answer necessarily alone itself.
But certainly like anything, you have to spend time with it, and you have to run it through different iterations and get familiar with it, and not be a denier of technology, would you say?
Yes, yeah, that's true. Like, I mean, I think you can I think using technology or having the attitude that this is going to allow me learn more about what's happening rather than just seeing it as an end in itself. And I think that's the challenge. But people would say that some of the older coaches, right? They didn't have technology. No, they did. They did. It was just a different form. They had stopwatches. They had weighing skills. They had heart. They did, and they did perform sports science. It was just different technologies, maybe not as advanced, but they used it to ask better questions, and they formed an opinion, or again, I use the term insight, in understanding what was going on. We just have more of them now, and I think we just have to wade through which are important and which aren't.
What's the most common question you get these days in terms of, whether people are trying to solve problems, or they want to learn more, or they want to get, a such and such a job? What are some of the questions that you get nowadays from people who want to tap into
I
your
get
knowledge?
I get a lot of questions about technology and GPS and why, what do I do with this? Because I think a lot of teams, a lot of organizations have the technologies, but they're not actually making use of them. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of people. And it's kind of like what's that fire fire aim set. They're working backwards. They
Yeah.
have the technology. So rather than trying to encourage them to ask, okay, what problem are you trying to solve, and then filtering down to what technology do we actually need for that. um, the other area that's very common now is also in developing what I call amplifier skills that allow you to do your job better. And again, that goes back to, like I said, in university now, so much is rote learning is um, not based around people skills and knowing how to communicate with people, knowing how to listen, knowing how to observe. There's a really actually interesting article that was in the Guardian, and I forget what the quote literally was, but it was talking about some political issue. But it was saying, sometimes you have to be comfortable not having an opinion and just waiting until it develops. Even that, having that patience. Um, and I think that highlights the fact that in coaching today, we have some really smart people, but with perhaps poor people skills.
Yeah. No, and if people aren't valuing that, and they're saying, okay, well, this person knows how to use GPS, this person knows how to coach this specific skill, but they're lacking those people skills, how would you encourage, or what would you encourage them to do to improve that? Like, take a course, or that's a tough thing, because people are always asking me, like,
Yeah.
oh, what do I do?
Yeah, but like I mean, like I mean, you've got two athletes who you're trying to improve maybe their correct their first step. And you're going to approach both of you. You don't even know it, but you speak to both of them in different ways based on how they perceive what you're saying to them. Um, and but that comes with experience over time. And I think it's not that there is one golden, it's just like it's like a running technique. There's no golden running technique. It's always varies. And so for you, how you would speak to get the same effect as I would be two completely different ways. We might still get the same outcome. And so a lot of it's about learning about yourself and about how you communicate. I think that's really important. But again, that a lot of that is trial and error. And to me, the goal of education is not the imparting of knowledge. It's about teaching you how to learn and how to teach yourself going forward. Because as coaches, we are lifelong learners, and learning how to learn or teaching you how to teach yourself, I think, is the goal. And that's an iterative process. You get a win, you get a fail. I was just off a call with someone earlier, and I was talking to them about setting up for myself an after action review process for certain events that I would do, so that I can keep learning what went well, what didn't, what are the things I have to look for, what's that process going to look like going forward, and that's really, really helpful, I think, if you want to keep learning.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I was on a call earlier and we were talking about an athlete that this coach had, and the athlete really only knew how to do on or off. So he would just put 100% effort into everything, or he wouldn't. And he didn't understand these different levels of output that he could be aware of and implement throughout a game, a match, in AFL. And so we started talking about his personality, and is that what his personality is like. And then so what it ended up being was like a mentorship around teaching this athlete to be aware of different states, and like you said, it was, let's make him self-sufficient in managing his own output or personality or whatever. So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and the funny thing about that is, like, I mean, we all, when we start off in sport, we want to be the person. Like, we want to, it's about us. But as you start to, get more mature and realize what's going on, it is about, you're not the most important person, and you shouldn't be. It's about empowering and teaching, whether it's the athlete or the coach, uh, to become more aware, and so they don't need you. Like, the goal of a genuinely the goal of a good teacher is to become irrelevant. The goal of a good coach is to become irrelevant. Now, it's never going to happen, because you're always, the athlete's going to come back to you with a slightly different question each time. But you don't, I remember Bruce Snyder saying one time, coaching an athlete, and he said they can come down the track and make whatever mistake they want, just don't make the mistake that I just corrected. Well, as coaches, if the player keeps coming back to you, or the athlete keeps coming back to you with the same problem, well, is that not a poor reflection on you as a coach, that you're not helping them? And one thing too that I disagree with a lot of coaches. Coaches say, "Oh, you got to explain everything to them. They have to know the why." That No, they don't. They don't. Some of them want to, and yes, you have to be able to, but you don't need to explain everything to them. Some people just want to know, yeah, what do I do? And you can slowly build on that over time. But that was a mistake I made in my career early on. Was I thought that the athlete was like me. They want to know everything. They want to know the science and everything. No, they don't. But I have to explain it in a way that they can understand. They're two different things.
Well, would you say that happens with your clients too, whether it's a team, and sometimes they just want you to point them in the direction, as opposed to necessarily educating them and explaining everything?
Mm.
Like an example would be, again, technology. Like, what should we buy? And do you have to educate them on all the ins and outs, or do you just say, like, this is the best way, just do this?
Yeah, I find that frustrating, to be honest, because I want to help people. I want to empower coaches, but yeah, yeah, some people just want, what do I do? And there are times as well with that. Uh, yeah, I was having this conversation with a doctor. Like, there are times when, in emergency medicine, you just got to treat, the issue at hand. and then slowly you can build on that. But for me, it's also, you know, it's very difficult to walk into a team and just provide like honestly, just provide an exact answer. Like, if you're being truthful and honest, you have to see what's going on and help them find the right solution. Now, broadly speaking, you know what it's going to be, but in order to implement it in a way that's going to be sustainable, it takes a little bit of time and empowering them, and also helping them understand how it works for them. So if it's, for example, with technology, well, what does the head coach like? Who are the stakeholders in this? How are you gathering this? How much time have you got as well? Like, have you got interns? So knowing all of that, then you can provide a really good solution. But also, last point on that is, I always see this as problem solving together. Helping, between us solving the problem, rather than just coming in saying this is what you should do, because um, it has to work for that person. I'm sure you've seen the same thing. You can just go in with an answer.
Yeah, yeah, and that was like kind of my next question is if you're working as a consultant and you want to do a good job and you almost like you said you almost want to make yourself to be indispensable on the one hand, but at the same time you want to you want to solve their problem and get out too. Like how do you, as a consultant, this is an interesting question for me, is as a consultant how do you continue to be successful and be in demand at the same time? Because if you solve too many problems, uh, then they don't need you anymore.
Well, I think one of the myths, is that you can just get a team to the top and like you fix something and that's it. You know, there's always something going to come up, so it's about refining it and improving it. And I think the really good teams look at, they look for the principles and they want to implement those. And then it becomes a conversation. You build a relationship over time. Unfortunately, the teams that just want a quick fix, they end up with lots of challenges. So you end up getting called quite a bit by them. But if you're trying to put something in place, um, you know, you, you know this as well. Like, I mean, you meet someone and you find out very quick. I class it in two groups: somebody who goes to work to keep their job, or someone who goes to work to do their job. Now, if you're just going to keep your job, you're just worried about how it looks. That person's always going to be looking for help. If somebody's going to work to really do their job and do it well, then they want to be the best that they can be. And those are the ones I enjoy working with the most, because it's a two-way street. You're learning from them and you're seeing how they implement things, and becomes this iterative cycle, this learning process, that's mutually beneficial. And those are the coaches that you enjoy working with the most.
Yeah, more like like you said, like an apprenticeship type relationship of back and forth and learning, as opposed to the transactional relationship of like, we hired Fergus and we got all the information. We got it from here because I'm sure you get that a lot too.
Yeah, and sometimes coaches, particularly younger coaches, think, okay, well, I get this information and that's it. Um, eh, the longer you coach, the more you realize there's more to just the information, just the knowledge. There's the nuances, there's understanding why things are done a particular way, and and that's something I've learned as well in my career. Like, I mean, I would see a program years ago and go, nah, that's useless. That's bad, or that's. But it's only over time when you see what the program is and you talk to the coach and you ask why. Why are you doing that? Like, there was a coach one time doing. I don't know. He posted something about doing a particular type of squat, and everybody was complaining. My reaction was, well, why are they doing it like that? I'm interested to know. Yeah, it looks unusual, but maybe he's got a really good reason. I want to know what that reason is. That's what interests me. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but more times than not, people have a really good reason for doing something, and that becomes educational.
Yeah, and then that's not something you can glean from just looking at the exercise. You actually have that reach out and have that conversation. And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and maybe that's why it's good to, if somebody hires you, to establish a long-term relationship, because like you said, nothing's ever going to be fixed and then everybody walks away. There's a maintenance component to that as well, to that
Yeah,
relationship.
it's like a Formula One car. You know, you fix something, it goes a little bit faster. Well, that puts tension somewhere else. You fix that, it goes a little bit faster. You got to put it moves tension around, and so it's being able to problem solve. To be honest with you, the most interesting thing is identifying what the real problem is. Very often with teams or organizations, so it might be, you know, people might be they might ask you to come in to talk about recovery and get the best recovery strategy in place. Now, really, the challenge is on the scheduling side. You fix that, then this becomes a little bit easier. And you know, with most teams, you know, uh, the two of the biggest challenges are, one is communication, just making sure everybody knows what's going on, and the second thing then is the synergy, making things work well together. Those are the two, and they're not sexy, so to speak, topics. But if everybody knows what's going on and people aren't, you know, protective about information or whatever it is things will move a lot quicker, a lot smoother, and then you can start to, create that synergy where things are working well and better together. Like, I mean, I've used this example many times. Now you've got you have a medical department, strength department. Now you've got a rehab or return to play department. I'm just going, that's a failure of communication between, strength and conditioning and medical to begin with.
Yeah, so you find you're coming in there being a bit of a mediator, sports psychologist, whatever you want to call it, and you're trying to bring people together as part of the solution as opposed to just passing on information.
Yeah. So one of the things as well, like, I mean, if you look back at, years ago, you had coaches. And so if you were to ask like an older coach or our, the generation ahead of us, like, I mean, what do you, what were you? Well, they would say I was part psychologist, I was part this, I was part that. Like, they had so many different roles. The specialization that we now have today, I think, encourages a certain amount of insecurity, incompetence, I guess, in some particular areas. And so that's one of the first things that you have to try and break down.
Yeah, no, I yeah, because if you're coming into a situation, I assume that you're trying to make everybody feel at ease, that you're not there to belittle somebody or take their job, and are you?
Yes, that's a great point. Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of the things I'm, you know, really conscious of. I don't want anyone's job. And secondly, you guys have the the information, the domain specific knowledge. Like, the players, the personalities, the coaches, what's going to work. Very often, my job is to ask questions in a particular way that are going to help you see or shine light on a better way of, or a more optimized way of doing things. And yes, there are some things that we can implement, but it's also about knowing, like, in your toolbox, which tools to suggest to each team, because not every, it's not the same in every team. Not the same things don't work. And, like, some teams you might want to do plyometrics, some teams you might want to do top end speed, some teams you don't. It depends on the situation. And some people will think, well, using "it depends" is a lazy way. It's not. It's the reality. It really depends on the situation, particularly, on the professional level.
Yeah, so now I'm sure you're doing it, I'm doing it, I'm constructing courses around this information that we have, this experience we have. What have you found is the best way to do that now? So now that you're going to teach others what you know, is there a, do you have to have that social component? Do you have to, how long is it going to take? And are you a bit insecure about getting that information out there without surrounding it with all of these things that you've just described, especially in a virtual
Yeah.
course?
No, no, no. I am, and there's a few things. One is, there's an imposter syndrome. Like, I mean, who am I to um, present this? The second thing then is, yes, knowing that it's not going to be complete, because it's, you're not actually mentoring someone. So those are two challenges that I had to think through. Um, for the first one, it was, look, I'm not saying that I'm the best or this is perfect. This is what I have done. This is what I've found to be successful, and this is the feedback that, that I've gotten from, and so this is how I've done things, and this might be helpful. Um, on the second one, I think it's about doing things in a way that, and that's one of the benefits of social media, is now you can record and you can demonstrate things, which is a little bit better than just simply, on paper. So you're bridging that gap and it's getting closer and closer. But there's still nothing beats sitting down with somebody. And this as well, like sitting down having coffee sometimes are where some of the greatest insights and explanations come from, not just watching someone coach. But also, one of the other things that I've become quite aware of is that, you know, I coach in a particular way, or I teach in a particular way. If you were to ask me to describe that, I would, but I would probably leave things out that I'm not aware of. And you only see that, the other person only picks that up from being around you. And so, one other thing that I think is really, and I'm sure you find this as well, when you start to write a course or put something together, there's a lot of work for you to structure it, clarify your thinking, organize it. It's a really helpful process for the coach, or for you. I find that helpful.
Oh, absolutely. It forces you to really rethink your approach and the information you have. And like you said, there's a lot of insecurity that goes into making a good course, because you're like, okay, I gotta explain this more. Or I have to provide more demonstrations of this because I'm not sure if they will get it. And I'm sure you're going through that as well, where
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
this
or you,
audit. It's an audit of your abilities.
yeah, or like you mean, so you're looking at speed, for example, and okay, I've only maybe 8 key things to look at for biomechanics, but I've got 15 on, organizing, for sports speed and teams. And you're going, do I have enough in this, or is this too many? Or, why is this shorter? And so there's all of those things. But I think what I enjoy about it is, the freedom to present what I have found helpful. And I try to, uh, one thing that I found useful is not to look at how other people have done things, because I think that can stifle creativity. There's some things you want to see how they do it, but you want to come up with your own individual way. Otherwise, you're just copying what others have done. And I think that's refreshing, because you look at it from a different way. You look at it from a different perspective. And I love when people, present something and I go, wow, I would never have thought of it looking at it like that. Um, I had a ice hockey coach. They were taking some of the principles, or some of the things that I'd helped them with, but how they presented it, I went, wow, that's really good. I'm going to steal some of that. That's what I love. That's what I love. I love seeing that kind of stuff. I go, man, that's that's good. That's what gets me excited, because you go, yeah, now they're being creative and they're thinking for themselves. It's just too easy to copy others.
Yeah, so I'm going to put you on the spot here. Why should I learn from Fergus Connolly? What can Fergus provide for me? You're going to have to put on your marketing hat here a bit, but I want to hear what you have.
Y- Yeah, yeah, and I hate it. Like, I mean, I hate marketing. I hate all of that. We've had this conversation, but um, in the most depreciating way, like, I mean, I've made more mistakes than anybody else, or that I know of. I think, for me, what I've been fortunate to do is to work in different sports, but you learn that it's the athlete. So I've had to refine principles, um, of performance, and I guess a lot of it is just having had the experience working with different athletes, different teams, and this is what I've done. This is what I've found to be useful. Uh, what I again, like I say, what I love is when somebody takes something of that, that I may have used, and improves upon it or makes it better. That's exciting. But it's just the different experiences, and I've spent a lot of time, like you have, simplifying, or creating a structure and a system, which that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of experience, because it has to be sequential. Um, it has to be logical. It has to make sense. Um, and And also, one reason, one other reason that you should learn from me is that I know I don't have all the answers, and this is what's worked for me, and this is why I do it. Try it, build on it, get better. The one thing I do, like, and I say to people all the time, don't take anything I say as gospel. I'm not a guru. Don't want to be a guru. This is what has worked for me, and this is why I do it. But this idea of like, there's only one way to do things, no, it doesn't. Learn from everybody.
Yeah, so this is your personal expression of your experience, and you've put it in a way that's organized and is a system so that people can work off of that. And I think that's really important. A lot of people will poo poo like, oh, he has a system, but it's kind of just a starting point or a framework. And then you've added in your own humility as part of that process. Is that how you kind of see it?
Yeah, it's a better way of putting it than I did. But yeah, well, yeah, but I think the system, the system is, yeah, like, you mean, you can call it, you can put a name on it or whatever, but the system is really, really important. To your point, uh, all of these things, nothing exists in isolation. So there has to be a rationale and a reasoning for it. And when you have that system in place, uh, particularly, and again, my experience is only in team sport, but that's so important so that everything can work well together, as opposed to coming up with, you know the world's best ashtray for a motorcycle. Like, it doesn't matter, it's not going to work. So you have to have something that is going to work within the system. I think sport humbles you all the time anyway, and it's also an acknowledgement that if I see you do something better tomorrow, I'm gonna use it. You know, I will.
And you're going to try to make it better too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, you mean, I see people do things all the time, and I go, man, that's smart. And also, the other thing that is important, particularly from a creative point of view. A lot of times we don't think of coaches as being necessarily creative, but I will see something done, and I won't copy it, but it will spark a thought for me about how I can do something else. So I see somebody doing a stretch or an exercise and go, "Man, I can adapt that in this other area," and that's why it's important to allow yourself to be creative and try things. I'm going to try this, see if it works. But I think at your core, uh, you first do no harm, and secondly, you care about these athletes. You want to help them get better. Then you can do whatever you want, within reason. But you can try things, tweak the training program. And I think one of the other conflicts we have today is that everybody wants a research paper before they're going to do something. Man, you're going to wait a long time for that.
That's a very good point. And how important, like just hearing you talk there, how important is it to have peers, not mentors or people that follow you or sycophants, but peers that you can bounce the ideas off of and maybe, get people saying, encouraging you or maybe even countering you a bit. And, how important is it to have that network of peers that you bounce stuff off of that you trust
I
as well?
Yeah, no, it's really important because you know there are lots of times I will think, despite all the experience, you'll go, man, is this the right way? Or you see something and you hear a lot of noise about something, you go, you need to reach out to somebody to go, like, what do you think? Or am I wrong to think this particular way? And I actually did that recently with a coach. Both of us actually were working at a team, and they had sent us something to review. And rather than send back the feedback straight away, I contacted the other coach to go, I see this. Like, is this as a parent, or am I overthinking that? No, no, no. Yeah, I think the same thing, and that's helpful because it's like a reference. These are reference points that keep you on track, and we need that. And you need to just make sure they're they're the right ones. They're good people that you want to bounce ideas off, because everybody at a certain point, they all come with different experiences, so they think in a particular way. Very few people have the exact same experiences as you, and so yeah, it's great to get uh, to have those, like you said, peers who can. Yes, there's times we all need encouragement, and then there are times when we need, hey, now you need to think. differently about this or that. And it's really important in this industry.
Yeah, and I've even found some value, and probably you have too, is talking to some younger people. So they might be in their 20s and you bounce something off them and they're like, "Well, we kind of see it differently and this is how we," and I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I never thought of that," right? So
Uh-huh.
having some younger minds look at some of your information and see how they interpret it, I think sometimes can be valuable.
That's a great point. Like, I mean, as you do too, mentor some coaches, and the questions, first of all, that they ask you are really insightful because there are things you take for granted or things that you assume. That's the first thing. Second thing then is when you're putting something together for them, they go, this doesn't make sense or that doesn't make sense. And it does, it's just you haven't actually explained it well. And so it forces you to go back and explain things in a better way. And so that's a really has been a really helpful process for me. And it's probably something that I didn't appreciate, before. I was always so focused on perhaps trying to learn or trying to, be around or learn from older coaches. But with younger coaches, you know, there's a lot that you can learn from them. Why are they doing it that way? Why? And and just staying up to date as well with young people. Like, I mean, how they interact. Like, I mean, what's TikTok? I don't know. TikTok, like, I mean, stuff like that. It keeps you young, but it's important. You got to know you got to be able to communicate with people, know what's going on in their lives. But young coaches are very, very helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have young kids, teenagers myself, and that's a challenge in itself, but certainly I can even learn stuff from my own kids. So I'm kind of
So many years ago, Derek, I don't know if I told you, many years ago, I had a forum, and I tried to create this forum for like professional coaches. And the idea was that, I would invite all these coaches to come and share information. And it was like an invite only. And it was an absolute disaster. And on reflection, the reason was that I didn't have younger coaches asking questions to provide a material for people to respond to. And that was a big learning experience for me as well, was that, just assuming that people will, you need different levels of education and coaching to create that friction that drives it. So somebody asks a question that might seem innocuous or simple, somebody replies to it, then somebody goes, no, well, actually there's a little bit more that you need to add to it, and that becomes that coaching process. So having coaches around you of different levels is important. Something, again, took me a while to appreciate.
That's a really good point. Never thought of that in terms of, yeah, you need those different levels of experience and wisdom to generate, like you said, the questions and the dialogue, and then people can kind of fit themselves into that conversation. Yeah, that's a good point. Now, what is one thing, like if you were to give one thing that you would tell a young person now that they have to do in order to kind of launch their career or get them going, what is the most important thing in your mind?
uh I think it still comes back to interning. You got to go get off your backside and go and knock on a door and ask somebody, can I help you? Can I collect the cones even? Can I come and observe? Can I spend time with you? You can, and I know I'm shooting myself in the foot here, but you can do all the courses, read all the books, but nothing beats spending time with a coach. And, you know, like you, I've got a list of people who I can pick up the phone and talk to now, um, that I would have either interned or, you know, traveled to see them, spent money to spend time with them or to learn from them. But they're not relationships that I can pick up the phone and talk to people. That doesn't, you don't build those relationships without making an effort. And I think it's a differentiator. And I understand that, I understand the industry's tough, and I understand that, early on it's difficult, to get those opportunities, but that will separate you. The one thing I would also, though, warn against is becoming a serial intern, jumping from, you have to respect yourself. You do have to intern, build a relationship, and then start working. And, there are lots of coaches complain about the industry, but, there was no draft. You made the decision to become a coach. Go spend time with the coach, ask them about the professional and the personal aspects of coaching, and then make the decision. Is this what you really want to do? And most importantly, are you prepared to pay this price? It's a tough industry. It's a tough business. And if you're happy to pay that price, then go for it.
Yeah, that's
Don't
a
don't
good
don't don't
good point.
don't walk in and complain about it afterwards. Because you don't want to be an old bitter coach complaining. The industry's tough. It is what it is. But don't get into it and then start complaining afterwards.
Yeah, yeah, you have a choice. Good point. One final question. Uh, Hopefully COVID is opening, or closing, and we're going to be able to go. What is one big trip you want to do, where you want to go and see something or meet somebody? And if you're going to have your post-COVID trip somewhere and, you know,
Oh
have a
wow.
beer with somebody.
I really want to get back home and see my parents, to be honest with you. That's the very first thing. And that's been tough for me, on a personal level. Family, brother and sister, mom and dad are in Ireland, and you can Zoom, WhatsApp, and all those things. But that's been a challenge. It's difficult, being so far away from them. So that would be certainly the first trip. But apart from that, China and Japan are two places I really do want to visit, and it is as well. I've become more aware of the cultural influences on training and coaching, and that's been something that is I've become more aware of recently as well. So those are things that interest me.
Oh yeah,
How
yeah.
about you, Derek?
Well, if you get a gig in Japan, could you please invite me? Because I want to go back there. I've been there once,
Yeah,
and it
I've
was
never, I've
amazing.
never, I've never been.
Oh, I went there once for I think it was speed skating, and it was awesome. Like I totally immersed. It was a smaller city, and yeah, yeah, I would love to go there again, certainly. But other than that, I don't know. It's a really good question. I think I would probably try to find something where I could meet a bunch of people like yourself in one collection, and we
Mm.
all just kind of get together and we just share
Well,
ideas. And
yeah, that's something that I'd like to do. I'd like to, when this is all over, not even for a conference, but just uh, you know, get a group of, because I think our generation, sounding old again, but our generation, there are a group of us that have kind of come through the same trajectory, spent time with the same people, have the same values, the same principles, the way we look at performance, good people who, yeah, you just love to hang out with for a day or two and just share stories and learning experiences. And we don't do it often enough, because of the nature of the sport. But you would find as well that people generally all think the same way, whereas social media and Twitter just sets things up for
just
arguments.
divides people. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Have you been to Vancouver?
Uh, I have been to Banff. Yeah, I've been to.
Okay.
I flew into. That's a few years ago, actually. Flew in during the what do you call it, Stampede?
Oh, in
Is
Calgary.
that
Yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
in Calgary? Yeah.
Calgary.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
flew
We
into
don't.
flew to Calgary, but I've not really spent time in Vancouver. No, no,
Okay,
not
well,
properly.
we'll have to get you out here. Vancouver Stampede is when we lose the Stanley Cup Finals, and then everybody stampedes around the. Yeah, so that's a Vancouver
No, I
Stampede.
love again Canada. Pound for pound's probably produced more of the best coaches, physical therapists. You know, certainly outdone yourselves,
It's the cold
Canadians.
weather. It's the cold weather. Um, how do
Is
people get a?
yeah.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's important. I think that Canadians, I think the education system, I think there's a certain amount of humility. I think there's always been great coaches coming through. So there's something again about that culturally that I think people can learn from.
Well, and honestly, as far as sport goes, it's not as big as maybe some other countries in terms of like professional sport and all that. So you really have to have a passion for it if you're going to do it from a Canadian perspective. So I think that helps
That's
too.
Yeah, and last, I know we're going back, but I think one of the challenges we have now is that professional sport is an entertainment industry. That's really what it's starting to
Yep.
become. Whereas in Canada and in other countries, that generally produce good coaches, it hasn't really, that hasn't bitten. So it's really about developmental. It's about learning. It's about becoming a good coach rather than becoming a good, I was going to say entertainer. That's the wrong way to put it, but
Performer, performer.
yeah, professional in the entertainment industry. Yes.
Awesome. So how do people find more about your information, your courses, or if they want to hire you as a consultant? Where do we find you,
Sure.
Fergus?
My website's the easiest, fergusconnolly.com. Yeah, that's the, like, I mean, remember starting out years ago, who would have thought that you would have websites and social media would be such a big thing? Way back, yeah, I remember flying into Toronto, meeting Charlie and James at the airport. I still have a vivid memory of that. Like, I mean, who would have thought, 20 must be 20 years later, it's been an interesting journey. Still
Yeah.
going.
Well, I'm looking forward to your TikTok account. So, well, thank you very much for taking the time, Fergus.
Derek, pleasure.
Always enjoyable, and I hope to see you soon in person.
Please God, please God. Take care, Derek. Thank
Take
you.
care. Thank you.